Welcome. In the U.S., more than 3/4 of released prisoners are rearrested within 5 years, according to the National Institute of Justice. A big part of the problem is ex-offenders failing to find the help they need to go straight, help that is often available. But now there's an app for that. We'll hear about it in a minute. Also on today's program, some students design an alternative to a controversial Queens business improvement district that residents fear will price them out. Then 42nd Street re-envisioned. It includes light rail, excludes cars. And later in our public intellectual segment, a scholar examines microloans long-term. The results are not encouraging. First, though, staying out of prison. Approximately 2.4 million people fill American prisons and jails. Hundreds of thousands are freed each year. How come so few are able to reinvent themselves and find their way back into law-abiding society? Of course, there are many factors, including lack of skills, mental health issues for some, and prejudice against ex-offenders. But according to our next guest, what really keeps the revolving door spinning is the failure to connect ex-offenders to the resources that already exist. Ex-prisoners get free and don't know where to turn. Halcyon Social Incubator fellow Brian Ferguson is working to fix this with Angel's List, a sort of Angie's List or Yelp for ex-offender social services. Ferguson knows the territory firsthand. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And will you tell us a little bit of your own story first, how you came to know this territory firsthand?
So I do know the territory firsthand. Just a bit of background. In 2002, I was a college student, had a 4.0. I was working for one of the most prestigious law firms in the country and filling out law school applications when I was unfortunately wrongfully accused and convicted of a homicide in West Virginia. I was sentenced to life in prison with no parole.
Wow.
Yeah, and I fought for 11 years to have my conviction overturned, and it eventually was.
And it eventually was, and you got out. But before we get into the whole ex-offender question, does this make you kind of unique? If that's your story, and you were just, a straight as an arrow guy on the path to success, and you got wrongfully accused of something, then you're very different from the average person who winds up behind bars. And so the recidivism prevention question would be very different, or do you think I'm wrong?
No, I actually think that's a very important point to address, because I am different than the majority of the people coming home from prison, or even who have a record. And I was given several advantages, and despite the advantages that I had, including not having to look for housing or food when I came out of prison, which is a plight that many people have to deal with when they come home, I still had a terrible time trying to find any of the resources that I needed to get myself to be self-sufficient, to get my foot, one foot in front of the other. It was a difficult task, but if I were able to have some place to go, some place to look to see, all of the services that were available to me, it would have been a lot easier. And given my background, it would have been a lot easier for a lot of the people coming home too.
And so it must be that much harder for people who can't come home and say, I was exonerated as part of their rap.
Right. Yeah, and so, when people come home, they face a gamut of hurdles, and there are services out there for them, which is something that I found out in a lot of my research. But they're very displaced in the system, and you don't know where to go, and it's a difficult task to try to find them, especially for a population that's not most of them are actually not very well versed in computers, the internet, and so forth.
So tell us about Angel's List.
Okay, so Angel's List is a comprehensive database that rates all of the services available to returning citizens when they come home.
Mm-hmm. And is it an app per se?
It would be a website and an app, something available mobile and on your desktop. Again, the main component of it is the rating service, so that returning citizens would be able to one, participate in rating the systems, rating the services, so that the other returning citizens could see which ones are effective, which ones would potentially meet their needs, and so forth.
And this is not live yet.
No.
This is under development.
Yes.
Is it definitely going to happen, or is it a dream and you need funding and you need developers? What state is it in?
It's absolutely going to happen. We've received tremendous support with exceptional momentum. We initially received an unbelievable amount of support from Halcyon Foundation, who really put so much of their resources, time, and network into getting us off the ground. And our involvement with Halcyon has just taken it to another level. Halcyon is an incubator program, 14-month-long incubator program that really just puts you in contact with an unbelievable network of people and gives you the in-kind services of an amazing array of media experts, consulting experts, financial, so forth and so on.
And it's not just, as I understand it, the people themselves coming out of prison, but it's the people who are assigned to help them. Like in your case, if I got it right, your reentry counselor didn't know where to help you look.
Right, and it's important to note that he was a very good reentry counselor. It's just that he was working, as a lot of them are actually, as actually all of them are, from an antiquated set of documents, of data, basically pieces of paper with half of them, or at least a third of them, the services I'm talking about, either being different or not in existence anymore at all. And so the fact that even someone who was dedicated to helping a returning citizen to find their way, to find the direction and the services that they needed, even that person, even someone like that, was unable to, to put me in a position that I needed to be.
Which shows how dispersed these resources
Absolutely.
are and how disconnected from each other. So what would be the first steps in an ideal world, if we can say, for an average prisoner having served his time? What would he do? What should he do?
Well, after the site is launched, when prisoners come out, they're really given nothing. When you step out of prison, you're given whatever property that you may have, whatever money that you may have in your commissary, and basically you're told good luck, and if you mess up, then you're coming right back. And a lot of them do fall into that trap of coming right back because, despite their best efforts and their best intentions, the landscape is so fraught with hurdles and obstacles to them that it's really difficult to stay out if you're not aware of everything that's available to you. So what should they do? They should be given Angels List. They should be given a database, much like Yelp, much like Angie's List, to help them in their reentry process.
So the Yelp model means other people, after a period of time that this exists, other ex-offenders would be rating the services of different organizations for how effective they were at finding them a job, how effective they were at providing mental health services, whatever it may be?
Yes, sir. Not only the ex-offenders, but their families who are, have firsthand knowledge of the struggle that the ex-offenders are going through, as well as, and this is very important, the service referral professionals. So the reentry counselor that I had for myself, and who many have, parole officers, probation officers, social workers, all of them need this service and would be greatly assisted by it.
And do you think that the existence of this service might actually increase the number of providers who are out there even offering reentry services?
Yes, I mean, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So in addition to increasing the awareness of the problem of reentry and recidivism itself, it would also serve to act as a filter for the ineffective services. So the competition that will be created is something that we're looking very much forward to.
There's so many obstacles to getting back into the mainstream economy for people coming out of prison. Are you an advocate of the ban the box movement?
I am. It's an amazing law. It's actually been passed in D.C.
And we should say this is a box that would ask, that is frequently used on job applications and I guess sometimes college entrance applications.
Yes.
That asks, have you ever been arrested?
Right. Have you ever been arrested? Has there ever been a criminal complaint filed against you? Any inquiry into your criminal history or criminal accusations against you, in D.C. at least, has been banned with a few stipulations. But I'm definitely in favor of it. They have an amazing agency in D.C., the D.C. Office of Human Rights that takes care of that. And it's something that's going to be extremely helpful going forward.
But as I understand the Ban the Box movement, it's to ban the question, have you ever been arrested? That's different from have you ever been convicted?
Sure.
Which is more the population that you're trying to help here.
Absolutely.
People who did serve time in prison and are getting out.
Well, people either who serve time or they might have had a conviction on their record and have never served time, but the conviction still stands.
Yes.
And acts as an obstacle to them.
Right. So what do you think employers need to know about, especially if there's a high recidivism rate, as you say,
Sure.
When deciding to take a chance on somebody with a conviction?
Well, as the D.C. law stipulates, employers are allowed to inquire about a conviction only after a conditional job offer is made. And so after the job offer is made, if they make a determination.
So first they have to see if the person is
Right.
otherwise qualified in the present,
Right. And
before they even investigate this past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what the law is meant to do. It's meant to get your foot in the door. It's meant to overcome that initial and huge hurdle of being, turned away just because of your past.
Is Angels List targeted to families as well as to the ex-offenders themselves?
Absolutely. That's a great question. As I said before, the families really go through it as much or almost as much as the offenders themselves. They're the ones who have to support as much as they can the citizen as he deals with his incarceration, has to support them as much as they can again when they come home. And so, yes, the families are an integral part of what Angels List would be doing.
Some of this is cultural. I don't know if you've looked at Europe, but we did another segment recently on my radio show about how there isn't as much stigma in most of Europe to having been a convict, to having served time in prison and committed many kinds of crimes,
Right.
as there is here. Have you looked at this across cultures? Have you thought about why do we so stigmatize this in the United States?
It's stigmatized in the United States. There's a long history of, politicians being, kind of tough on crime, and that leading to different laws that are then inherently fair to, certain populations, certain segments of the population. And the stigmatization of returning citizens is something that can change, and actually has been slowly changing. And we're trying to move that process a little bit forward.
Yeah. Do you think we're at a potential turning point? It seems to me that there's more conversation in the media, for example, about the criminal justice system, more awareness in the country about how our high incarceration rate compared to any other modern democracy, and an interest in doing something about it than there's been, at any time that I can remember.
Yes, there's a huge amount of momentum, which is, again, why I think that Angels List and what we're trying to do is so timely. Aside from it being really necessary, I think that it's timely because of the factors that you just mentioned. There's a lot of support on both sides, surprisingly, in D.C. That's something rare, but on both sides of the aisle, there's been support. There's been actually vocal support for
Let's see,
addressing recidivism.
Democrats want to give people a second chance, and Republicans want to save money in the budgets from the prison systems?
Right, and both can be done by reducing recidivism, absolutely.
Right. So when can people expect to see Angels List as an available website and app in the New York area?
In New York area, we're piloting in D.C., and the second wave would definitely be New York and Chicago. And so sometime within the next year, we'll definitely have Angels List up and running in New York and available for all the returning citizens, their friends and family, and for the service referral professionals here.
All right. Every resource helps. Thank you very,
Absolutely.
very much for discussing it with us.
Thank you.
It's a scenario that is unfortunately becoming all too familiar to New Yorkers. Rising property values flooding the varied cultural and economic landscape of our city's neighborhoods. In the latest example, a proposed BID, or Business Improvement District extension along Roosevelt Avenue in Queens, has put communities in Jackson Heights and Corona on high alert. Both districts are known for their vibrant immigrant communities, and talk of government improvement has got many people worried about their survival. Recently, some urban ecologies graduate students at Parson's, the New School of Design, took matters into their own hands, proposing development alternatives to the plan. This with the guidance of Quilian Riano, a lecturer at Parsons. His students also took a hard look at the bid process itself. Joining us, Quilian Riano and Parsons graduate student Mateo Fernandez-Muro. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Brian.
And we have a lot of images to show our viewers starting in a minute, but just tell us, for people who don't know, what is a business improvement district? We hear that term, but a lot of people don't know what it is. And why, if Jackson Heights or Corona hears that the city is putting on a push to improve the area, would that scare people?
A business improvement district is a tool, it's an urban tool that was created in the 60s into the 70s. And basically what it sought out to do from the beginning was it began to see that wealth was moving out into the suburbs, that malls were becoming the things they were. The malls were usually managed by one entity. And in urban context, then the people began to question whether something like it could be created. So this instrument of the improvement district, what it does is it collectivizes the business owners, and they create a self-tax. They basically vote to tax themselves in order to then receive the tax later on from the city into an organization, the Business Improvement District organization. New York City has the most bids in the world.
New York City has the most everything in the world.
The most everything in the world, although they were actually bid started in Canada, which is kind of an interesting. Toronto is a close second to New York City. And what happens is, and the critiques are this, they set out to solve a couple of problems. You know, they clean the trash a little more often. They have put a couple of security guards out. They do security, maintenance, and marketing. That's really the main goal. There are other things that business improvement districts do. But
it's like the trade association for the local stores?
It is, except a trade association doesn't have the tax. And that tax then allows this organization a bigger say on what happens in that neighborhood. They can begin to enact certain rules on signage, on who can be on the street, because the money's behind it. Here in New York, actually, once a business improvement district is proposed, the businesses have come together, it actually goes into some public conversations, although the public never really gets to approve it, and then the council itself is the one that approves it.
And in Jackson Heights and Corona, why would what you just described be seen as threatening rather than, oh, good, we're going to have more security, we're going to have more garbage pickup, things like that?
The critique of the Business Improvement District, the other side, is that it sets out and it does what it says it's going to do. It's going to pick up the trash and it's going to put a couple of security guards. But the payback for that is you create an urban instrument there that ends up giving power. And right now I'm basically talking a lot about the critiques of Michael Murray at the Harvard Environmental Law Review wrote it that although the bids have been working for what they set out to do, the problem with them is that they create an anti-democratic almost system in that people that pay more into the bid get a bigger say. It begins to create a system in which the people that pay up get to have a bigger say on urban context, usually public space, both the street, the sidewalk, etc. So the big problem here is the privatization of the city. And I think one thing that Jackson Heights and Corona is specifically afraid of is because they already have a little taste, the 82nd Street bid. And
so let's put up some images, first of that part of Central Queens. Mateo, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, we're seeing, I mean, the blue area is the already existing 82nd Street partnership. And the pink, all the red area, it's like the proposed business improvement district expansion.
Roosevelt Avenue, the big pink through line, that's exactly where the number 7 train runs, basically, right?
Exactly. And it's going from Jackson Heights until Corona, until Corona Plaza in the cross with 804th Street.
So let's see what this street itself looks like as we come in closer in that blue area. Mateo, continue to walk us through this.
Exactly. So these are some images of local businesses and even street vendors, some of the actors that are involved in the production of space and in the production of the city in this area, particularly in Jackson Heights and Corona. And those are images from one of the groups of the students that actually were really involved in studying and researching all the businesses and really small local businesses and street vendors that were acting in the area.
So, Quilian, keeping these same images on the screen, how does this intersect with the conflict you were describing before between the more deep-pocketed businesses and others interested in the public space?
What often happens, and what has been seen in business improvement districts, even in some examples here in New York City, is that the street vendors wouldn't be able to sell anymore. So that practice that is the first job that many immigrant families can have will be gone. Also, the many signages that you see there, that's something that often business improvement districts end up cutting back on. And I ask everybody, create rules around signage. Also, what we don't see in these businesses is that there's actually 2 or 3 people working out of any one store, so that would be gone. So it brings a level of scrutiny and formality into the street that would drive away some of those immigrant businesses.
What are we seeing here, Quilian?
We're seeing the beauty of this area of Queens, which is that it's a mismatch of multiple neighborhoods that come together, things that used to be little towns that grew at their own pace. And one of the things that's interesting about the Roosevelt Avenue itself is that it's the place where many of these things ended up crashing into. So what you end up with is a lot of little spaces that are triangular in nature that can't have too many uses. And that give opportunities for us as designers and as urban thinkers for alternatives.
So, Mateo, there's a design element here besides the politically charged power dynamics, economic dynamics. It is Parsons, the new school of design. Where does design come in?
Totally. I mean, we are trying to transcend the traditional idea of what design means. And what we're trying to do is to use design in its wider sense and its broader sense. And really, all the groups that are involved in Quilian's course, we're trying to use design, not just spatial design or architectural design, but really as I told you, in a broader sense. We had environmental scientists within the course. We had really people involved in the actors and directors in the. So it was really we were really trying to make people understand design is much more than architectural or spatial or urban design.
So let's take a look at another image. This is a view of under the 7 train, under the elevated tracks there, right?
Exactly. This is a project from Maria Morales and Bernardo Loureiro and Nadine Rashid, and they actually created these platforms as a way to design a process of interaction. So design relationships in between citizens, in between not just. I mean, the important thing here is not the result is not the object itself, but the design of the relations that it can trigger.
But Quilian, what is this actually? Because it looks like this imagining of that area is without cars, if there's a platform in the middle, or what are we really looking at?
No, actually, the cars are still there. It's just a safer way to get across the street. And what I think these students did that was really kind of ingenious is that they looked at the very specific rules that are already set by the Department of Construction, by the Planning Department, and they used the street seat program, the plaza program, and Vision Zero as a way to create a political process all along Roosevelt Avenue, using those as the catalyst, the design and putting things in real space as the catalyst to a political process and a political system that could rival even the BID.
Even using Vision Zero, you say, which is a new initiative in the last year to slow traffic and prevent accidents.
Exactly.
in various ways.
And if you've been to Roosevelt Avenue, you know how traffic it is and how hard it is to get across the street many times.
Right, I know. It's so crowded there. It's hard to imagine a serious accident there, though I could be wrong because traffic always seems to go about 2 miles an hour.
It's very true.
So what is this about a game, Mateo? This is something of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's our proposal. I was forming part of a group with another 3 students, Dimitra Kuri, Kartik Amarnath, and Mazum Moitra. And what we designed, as I told you before, it's a game. It's not an object, but it's a process that we tried to trigger it through this game or role-playing game. It's about bringing all the actors involved in Roosevelt Avenue and in the Business Improvement District to the table, to the decision-making table, and to make them. It's more like a kind of a pedagogical political tool to bring up this discussion.
But it looks like there are cards in this game.
Yeah.
Player cards. So
Yeah.
what investor? What's this an example of?
Yeah, this is the card of the most powerful actor in the area, which is the investor. And each player actually had a different piece, and each piece had a different size depending on the power of each character or each actor in this.
There's a much smaller piece.
Yeah, exactly. The much smaller. Actually, the smallest one is a street vendor. So as you can see, I mean, there's a really difference in between the investor, the size of the Lego piece representing the investor, and the size of the Lego piece representing the street vendor. And that actually means the political power that they have, each character has within the bid.
So part of the idea here, Quilian, is to represent in various ways, through a game, through some of the visual representations and so forth, the relative political power that different players have in a business improvement district extension project. And it sounds like you're out to save the vendors' livelihoods. That's at least part of your goal. Would that be fair?
Honestly, what we're out to is to make sure that this area of Queens, that it has the agency to see its own future. And if that means saving the street vendors, because that's a practice that the community itself already has, that's what that means. And one thing that I think is very important to point out about the game is that we see that the power dynamic, because after you played the game with the power dynamic that exists today, everyone is asked to, how would you change this power dynamic? And you begin to create agendas. That's why the game is called Agenda Engine.
Exactly.
How does the fact that this may be the most diverse area, maybe in the whole United States, in terms of how many different immigrant nationalities, live there, does that make your job easier, harder? Does it complicate all the interactions that feed into all these, what was the name of the game again?
Agenda Engine.
Agenda engines and bid power dynamics.
Honestly, I selected the site because I want that complexity. It's the American context. One of the things that we looked at a lot, and now I'm going to get a little too academic, but it's subjectivity and the role of subjectivity in political agenda making.
Uh-oh, now you're going to deconstruct yourself.
And now, so the game and this area is very important to understand. How can you cut across the things that seemingly seem to be different, but in all reality, a Bangladeshi tenant and a Colombian tenant are still tenants, and there's still commonalities there. And what also was interesting because of the tools that we developed in, there was an oral history project that was developed. There was the game as a way to live it. You don't even have to talk about it. You can play it, role play it, and then you'll begin to understand your place on that.
20 seconds. I understand that the bid director saw your work. What was her reaction?
She seemed, honestly, the bid director was there and the activists trying to stop the bid were there. And I was happy that it wasn't as contentious as I thought it could be. And she seemed to think that we could have pushed the reality of the projects more. But you can imagine in 3 months we did as much as we could actually do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating piece of life in New York City that most of our viewers didn't know about until now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Up next, 42nd Street, re-envisioned. Would a trolley be folly? As we discussed last week on the show, the city is making promises to step up what's called bus rapid transit, an increasingly popular method for improving bus routes with dedicated lanes and off-board fare collection. But there's one camp that says bus rapid transit is hardly going far enough. Instead, one group of transit advocates has challenged designers to re-envision 42nd Street with an above-ground light rail system and no cars. The competition, featured in Architect magazine, brought in hundreds of designs this year. We'll look at some of them and ask, too, ahead of the curve? Is it too ahead of the curve, or is the city far behind? Joining us, Roxanne Warren, architect and author of Rail and the City, Shrinking Our Carbon Footprint While Reimagining Urban Space, and chair of Vision 42. Also with us, Peter Brassard, architectural and urban design consultant. Welcome to both of you. And Roxanne, first, before we show some of these really interesting images, why imagine 42nd Street with light rail above ground? There's already the number 7 train and the S shuttle train that connects Grand Central and Times Square, goes across 42nd Street.
These are very different kinds of transportation. Subways are built for rapid transportation. Light rail, as we envision here, and as has been brought forth in many European cities, is not for speeding transportation in the city. It's for enjoying transportation, enjoying the city. Being at the surface rather than underground is an extremely pleasant way to travel.
So tell us about the competition.
We considered doing the competition roughly last April, although we had discussions earlier about it. It was through Architect magazine that it was an online competition. There were over 200 applicants worldwide. And then Roxanne,
Yeah.
you can.
Mm-hmm.
It was launched in April, and the submissions were due in September, and we had a jury in November, and we picked, the jury picked 4 winners. One of them was a student. The others were professional, some of them very experienced.
Let's talk over some images. We're going to show the works of 3 different winners right from the start here. This is a very bucolic vision of 42nd Street.
Yes.
Describe it.
Well, it has a green track, that is, the space between the rails is planted with grass. Absorbs rainwater, it absorbs sound, and it's very, very pleasant, makes for a very pleasant...
Now, I'm guessing where this is exactly. Is that 3rd Avenue and the train is heading east?
No, the train is actually heading west, and we're looking from 5th Avenue, I believe.
Yeah, it was a decent guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's another winning entry. This is a different imagining of 42nd Street.
This is from the same applicant. It is of 42nd Street at Times Square, and you can see that there's a different treatment to the street. So this is much more pedestrian area, so it would be hardscape, whereas closer to Bryant Park and Grand Central, there could be greening because there's less population.
Mm-hmm. All right, and continuing.
This is Bryant Park.
We're in Bryant Park with that
Yeah.
train, aren't we?
But we're on 42nd Street.
Well, the grass track continues the greenery, but this is 42nd Street.
Oh, but it's outside the park.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. I recognize some of the storefronts over there on the right, which would be across from Bryant Park. So I see. And this?
This is on the eastern end. There's the East River there, and the train is moving south. In our proposal, at both ends of 42nd Street, it moves south and ultimately it could create a loop with 34th Street.
What this does with the two Riverside terminuses, that they meet ferry terminals to bring people to and from ferries, whether it's going to New Jersey or to Queens and Brooklyn. This section is it's decked over a portion of the FDR Drive just south of the UN, so we run directly over that.
Right now, it's a very cumbersome trip to go from the center of Manhattan to the rivers. It takes forever, and the bus is terribly slow. Our engineers calculated that even without priority signaling for the light rail, it would, and it being limited to 15 miles per hour for the sake of pedestrian safety, it would still accomplish the trip from river to river twice as fast as today's buses.
So here's another submission. Tell us how this vision is different.
This is showing more of a plaza condition in front of the UN. It's a different train or design, but that it could be any design. It's, unlike around 42nd Street where there's a lot more people, there would be less in this area, so it's more of an open plaza condition.
Why start with 42nd Street? I imagine you would like this kind of thing at a number of places in the city.
Oh, yes.
Why start with 42nd Street?
Well, 42nd Street is the link among various heavy-duty transportation terminals. You've got Grand Central, you have the Port Authority bus terminal, you have the ferry terminals at either end, and we've got 5 times as many pedestrians as motorists on 42nd Street, and yet 80% of the street space is allocated to motorists. It's a gross imbalance, and it's not even productive for motorists. The traffic moves at a viscous pace of 2 to 3 miles per hour at midday.
Here's also some more images from that last entrant, who we saw that one from.
It's the similar grass treatment, but they've also proposed that what we're seeing is 2 platforms, one on the left and on the right, for each direction. In the distance, you'll see like a kiosk there where people can stand out of the weather. But in this scheme, there also is a grass landscape where the sidewalk is today along the south side of 42nd Street.
And one more, I think.
This is an
party time.
Yes, I think it's raining with the spots on the lens. It shows how energized with the light, in that this kind of system can have, on the effect of the city.
Now, we haven't seen any cars in any of these images, but they would still be going uptown and downtown, so there would be some intersections where all of this interacts with motor vehicle traffic, right?
Yeah, the cars would move on the north-south avenues just as they do today. There just wouldn't be any left turns or right turns on 42nd Street, which these turns are the source of terrible accidents today.
One more group that submitted to you and was one of your winners for designs to consider. This one looks like it was submitted by Monet. What is this actually?
This one is showing a series of berms, so to take the street and to actually create kind of like small hills, that the street does not necessarily have to be a flat condition, and we're seeing the train beyond in the distance, kind of moving by.
It kind of has the feel of the High Line.
Yeah, it does a little bit, well, especially with the mature trees. This is another version, but it can also show how the street could be really transformed into something that's a recreational space, which it isn't today.
This is a band by that same architect.
you'd have a band shell out
Right.
there on 42nd Street.
Sure.
And this is the, what's it called? Manhattan Hinge. I
Henge.
think.
Oh,
Is-
Manhattan Henge.
Henge.
Oh, this is, yes, because I think it's 2 nights a year
Right.
where the sun sets in perfect alignment with
With
the
the grid.
east-west street
Grid.
grid, right?
That's
So if you're
Right.
looking toward the Hudson River
That's correct.
from many places in Manhattan, you'll go blind, but you'll see a nice sunset.
Correct.
This is by a Portuguese landscape architect living in Scotland, working in Scotland.
Aha. Imagining the New York City that he's visioned. In a way, all 3 artists who we've seen a number of slides from are very similar. There's a shared essence
Yeah.
to the thing, I guess, because of what you were asking for, would you say?
Yes, certainly. From one of your earlier questions regarding how this would apply to other parts of the city, we had identified 20 bus routes that have enough ridership, or way over the ridership, that would really be served well by this kind of system. So it could be in all of the boroughs.
When you have this high ridership, say more than 25,000 passengers per day, it becomes less expensive to operate if it's light rail.
Cheaper than the select bus service?
Yeah.
Bus rapid transit,
Yeah.
you mean?
The-
Really?
There's a big difference between
Because-
bus rapid transit and select bus service, because true bus rapid transit really needs a lot more space than we have here in New York.
An example would be in Bogota, where they have that. They have 4 lanes, plus they have inner platforms. It takes up a lot of room.
And select bus service is not that select because, for example, on 34th Street now, the lanes are perpetually invaded by cars.
Sounds like a job for the de Blasio Vision Zero, broken windshields, police force.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of policing.
So does history suggest that your idea could become reality, or does this turn out to be an academic, intellectual, artistic exercise for you and the people who've submitted?
No, I think it really has a chance of happening. Whether it's completely pedestrianized, as we've proposed, it may not be. But this is the time for light rail in the city. Other parts of the world, in this country and in Europe and Asia, have been installing these systems with incredible success.
We are out of time, but
Oh.
it is interesting to note that we live in a moment where these kinds of things are more in the public discussion and less seen as pie in the sky than any time I can remember. It's really a part of the revitalization of New York. Thank you both very much.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Time for Public Intellectual, where we look at new research with the power to change minds and public policy. Microcredit, or modest loans designed for people without access to traditional banks, have been celebrated as magic bullets, a way to lift millions out of poverty. Lend a person a few bucks on a handshake, and they'll start a business like basket weaving or mobile phone rentals. And not only will they pay back the loan, but they'll get themselves out of extreme poverty. The Grameen Bank in Bangladesh was the very first to make such loans, and along with its founder, Muhammad Yunus, won the Nobel Peace Prize for this in 2006. But some research suggests that while microcredit has benefits, it doesn't change life conditions all that much in poor societies. A collection of 6 studies done in 6 parts of the world casts further doubts. The studies were published in the January issue of the American Economic Journal, Applied Economics. The lead author is Abhijit Banerjee. He is Ford Foundation International Professor of Economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Director of the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, and joins us via Skype from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Was there a specific question about microloans that you set out to research and answer?
Well, there was one specific, as you said, there's one specific agenda that was set, I think, by the claims made by the microcredit organizations, which is to test whether it really does lift people out of poverty. So that was the basic impetus of the study, of the studies.
What population did you measure, and how did you formulate a control group and a test group?
So these were all randomized control trials, kind of like medical trials done on a very large scale. So these were often in the particular countries it varied, but let's say in India there were 100 neighborhoods, just over 100 neighborhoods. 50 were chosen by lottery to be the treatment neighborhoods, which got access to microcredit. The other 50 were left as control, and we compared outcomes of the average person in these two neighborhoods.
Wow, a controlled experiment, like a medical trial, right. Randomized, as you say, and 100 neighborhoods in India alone. That's a pretty big sample. And then you had 5 other countries?
Yes. So there was Ethiopia, Mongolia, Mexico, Morocco, and Bosnia. So these are like very different countries, some very poor countries like Ethiopia, some much richer countries like Bosnia. So a whole range of countries, very, very similar results. That's what's striking about these studies. They were put together because essentially said the same thing, which is that you don't find evidence of people becoming significantly less poor.
What about the people who took the microloans? They, as individuals, did not become significantly less poor?
That's correct. That's correct. They did not, as individuals. The study was a study of individuals, even though as I said, the neighborhoods were chosen. Within neighborhoods, we surveyed individuals, and we looked at whether the average individual in the chosen neighborhoods was less poor after 18 months or even 3 years than the average individual in the non-chosen neighborhoods.
Does that mean that these businesses tended to fail, or does it mean they worked just as hard and made just as little money than whatever previous subsistence kind of lifestyle they were living, if that's the right way to put it?
Yeah, actually, neither. It's many cases what happened was that they started a small business which didn't do very much. So it's not that they gave up whatever they were doing. Some cases they did, but a very kind of canonical example is one where they start a small business. They already have a living of some kind, and then they make a little bit of money, but just about enough to cover the interest on the loan, so you don't end up any different. You pay some interest, you make some money, those kind of cancel out, you stay roughly where you are.
So how do you account for the massive popularity of the Grameen Bank experiment, so much so that it won the Nobel Peace Prize after its work in Bangladesh? Was it a hoax? Was it successful but a fluke? How do you explain Grameen Bank?
I haven't done this particular kind of study, which is, as you know, is a particularly kind of rigorous kind of study, has not been done with the Grameen Bank. They haven't agreed to do one. But my strong suspicion would be we'll find the same thing with them. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is whether or not, and I think you ask exactly the right question, why did people want it? I think people want it for the same reason as, I want a loan to buy a car. This was kind of the one thing that this allowed people to do is get a chunk of money that they needed for some reason. They could buy a television, they could repair their house, they could get their daughter married, whatever it is, they needed a chunk of money. That money wasn't forthcoming in other ways. They got it, and then they paid down the loan. They may have even worked a little harder to pay down the loan. That's a very normal thing for us to do. When we don't have enough money, you or I will borrow on our credit card, and then we'll find a way to pay it down. Think of it as being a credit card for the poor, rather than a kind of a life opportunity which changes your life.
But should we see that as a benefit, even if a limited benefit, if they were able to get money for a wedding or money for a television, but generally they were as poor as they were before? Well, they still have the television or whatever the thing is.
Yeah, I think if it is a benefit. My view is that, we're always a little too willing to assign to the poor moral values that we aspire to but don't have. Like, they are supposed to be working their way out of poverty rather than enjoying the television. So I think we have this is a temptation we always have. And I think that's often leaked into the conversation of microcredit. If we just thought of it as a product which helps them get what they want, I don't see that's normal, and it's great that somebody did it and it was profitable enough that they could keep doing it and could expand. All of those things I see as being, normal, good things to happen, which it just wasn't a miracle.
But I see that a few of your other findings, if I'm getting this right, is that people tended to buy fewer temptation goods, you might call them, with the money they were making, and they also were saving less. Both true?
Both true, but I think both. There's nothing particularly unusual about that. When I buy a car, I take out a loan and buy a car. I put a down payment. My savings go down. I also cut back on some other things. Maybe I'm going to, instead of going out to dinner, I'll stay home, and that's going to be for me, that's a temptation good. And so I'm going to stay away from that to save the money so I can pay the interest on the loan. It's no different from I think this looks exactly like what you would do if you were to take out a loan to buy a car.
So based on the results of your study, would you recommend that countries not launch microloan programs as anti-poverty programs, or what kind of policy recommendations would you come out with?
I don't see why it should be seen as, because it doesn't make people less poor, it's necessarily a bad thing. But on the other hand, I think one should be careful in sort of not conflating serious anti-poverty efforts with this. So I don't think you should say, okay, we've done microcredit, now forget about the poor. I think that's the danger that I think we should stay away from.
Can I come back to something you said before about people's moral view of what poor people should be doing, should be working hard to get themselves out of poverty? Do you think that microloans became such a hot item in the Western media and in Western think tanks and maybe philanthropy, I don't know, because there was this sense that they were instilling a work ethic in people who needed one?
Oh yeah, I think definitely. Or instilling, I don't know, but the fact that it was kind of working off that entrepreneurial urge that we are supposed to have. And, I think that made it very fashionable. It was people loved the idea of poor people, basket weaving their way to wealth and prosperity. I think that was a very attractive vision, especially to people who are in the entrepreneurs themselves. It's a very attractive vision.
Is there nothing that's a little better about offering someone a loan that they then pay back and maybe they've gotten a few more goods out of the bargain, as you're saying, as opposed to giving aid which then doesn't get paid back?
Well, there are some advantages. The money gets paid back. You can give it to other people. There's some disadvantages. There's some evidence that at least with very poor people, there's a bunch of studies similar to these again randomized control trials showing that actually that actually changes people's lives in a more durable way. Incomes do go up. That's when you give people an asset, the asset doesn't vanish. Instead, about 3 years later, you go and look at those people, they're a little less poor, they're a little less unhappy. So I don't see that as being obvious. It may very well be that just the fact that these people are stuck where they are, you give them a little push, they might actually go a little bit further and maybe they'll be a little bit better off. So it's not clear to me that there is a presumption that a loan is better.
Another miracle cure debunked. Another researcher finding truth in complexity. Thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee.
Well, thank you.
And that's Public Intellectual for today. And that's our program for today. We're here every week at this hour. Next time, a special show from the Ford Foundation. I'll be moderating a discussion about technology and society. The guests are Laura Poitras, who made the Edward Snowden documentary, Citizen4, and Snowden's lawyer, Ben Wisner, from the American Civil Liberties Union. Meanwhile, consider tuning in to my radio program weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC, 93.9 FM, and AM 820. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.